Okay, good morning. Just a little brief rundown on me and my wife. Very important part. We've been doing this for a while. Started out as a Boy Scout project with our younger son, and it has grown from 2 hives to 80 or so right now. Today we're here to talk about queen production equipment needs. The first and the most important need is the valuable queen mother, or a real valuable breeder queen, which you could pay anything from $150 to $8 or $9 or $1,000 or $1,200 for. And lots of drones. Very, very important in any queen production operation, no matter what method you are using. We need those drones. So you need some type of drone frames that you can rear drones in, in a good hive, that you have good qualities. We call them a drone mother hive, drone production hive. We need those drones. So you have hives that are exhibiting qualities that we all want in our bees. So you pick those as basically drone mother colonies, and those are the ones you want to raise drones, whether you're raising them from frames that you've only put a small amount of foundation in, or whether you've purchased the green drone frames from Piraco to raise a lot of drones. But we need those drones, very important resource. Maturing drones must be present. Drones take about 40 days from the time their egg is laid until they reach sexual maturity. 24 days to emerge, and another 12 to 16 days for them to mature. Queens can be raised almost any time. I can raise queens in January if I got a nice bolsterous hive that wants to draw out queen cells, but we have to have drones in order to mate. So we have to wait until we have much better weather, like we're finally having. Various methods used to raise queens will require different types of equipment. We can use emergency cells, we can use natural swarm cells, we can use the non-grafting methods that have been discussed. Dana talked a little bit about each of these, or we can use the Dolittle grafting method. Each of these methods requires a little bit of specialized equipment, as you saw in Dana's slides previous to mine. We have the Miller method, we have the Genter, the Nicot system, where we have the various little components, which, like Dana said, is very expensive. It's a good little method, again, depending on the pocketbook and how you want to do it. Like Dana said, ask one beekeeper, you'll get that beekeeper's opinion on what worked best for them. You have to try some of these things and see what works best for you. The Dolittle method requires removing of young larvae, 12 to 24 hours old, and these larvae are placed into cell cups. The cell cups are then placed on the grafting frame, which basically looks like this. You can use various assorted different types of cells that you are using to raise the queens in. We'll pass these around. We'll pass them around, they'll be up here. You have plastic cells, you have wax cells that you can make yourself. Use a little bullet to form wax cups and stick them to that. That's a couple of the different things that you might need to raise your queen cells on. Again, you're going to need the different types of cell cups, the grafting frame. You're going to need grafting tool of various assorted designs. The Chinese tool has a little flexible wheel tip on it with a little push piece of material that helps push the larva off as you are grafting. You have metal ones which have little hooks on them. You have a fancy automated gizmo that is supposed to push the larva off for you. This one costs about probably 5 times as much as this one. You have little plastic ones that are real cheap. Again, we talk about preferences. The Chinese tool is the one that all of you's got in your little goodie bag. You've got plastic cell cups, and at the end of the day, when you get your certificate, you'll be getting a grafting frame with some cell bars on it to get you started in your endeavors of queen rearing. You need to collect royal jelly in order to do the method with grafting. You need to have a little bit of royal jelly. Again, personal preference. It's called wet grafting, where you have to collect some royal jelly and you mix it basically 50-50 with water.
Distilled water.
Distilled water. You don't want chlorine. You can collect it in these little tubes. We started down here. You guys can pass this around. You can open the end of it and look at it if you've never seen royal jelly. Don't shake it. It gets a little sticky. But you collect some of that royal jelly from queen cells that have been started. Most of the time, this time of the year, when you open up your hive, you are going to find some queen cells in there that have been started that you really don't want started. Collect the royal jelly from those queen cells. Just scoop out the larva, and I use the end of a ballpoint pen cover. Makes a good little scoop. It's handy. I usually have a pen in my pocket. They sell little scoops that you can buy to do that with, but ballpoint pen cap works just fine. And you put it in a little miniature test tube of something that you want to be able to seal up and keep cold. It can be put in the freezer and kept pretty much indefinitely. You don't want to leave it in your hot car. It will kind of lose its qualities. When we talk about royal jelly, this is what we're looking at. We're looking at the white creamy substance that is in the cell cup. When they are raising queens, they are really putting a lot of royal jelly in there. That's what that queen needs to develop. She needs lots of royal jelly. Again, we start out as eggs, and you don't graft an egg. You're going to graft larvae, which these larvae are way too big to graft. You're going to be looking for very, very small larvae that have just barely started getting some royal jelly into the bottom of those cells. That larva and the pool of royal jelly around it are almost identical in size. That's the ideal age larva that you want to try to get. And sometimes it's hard. It takes practice. Just like any of these methods, you're not going to have success on the very first time that you try them. So you're going to take your little grafting tool and you're going to select a nice young larva, and you're going to put that grafting tool in there, scoop underneath the larva, and take that larva with that little bit of royal jelly and put it in the bottom of your cell cup. Well, we talked about collecting royal jelly to put in there first. Well, we got the little tube of royal jelly, and now basically you want to mix that royal jelly 50-50 with distilled water, and you're going to take a very, very small eyedropper or a syringe, pipette. This dropper on this thing here has about 1/2 the tip size as a regular eyedropper that you would, give your child nose drops or something with. Basically, you need something with a small tip. You don't want to put too much royal jelly mixture in the bottom of your cell cup that you're grafting into. So you need something that can give you a very small droplet, and you put droplets of this along your cell cups before you're going to start your grafting. At that point in time, you have your royal jelly lined up in, and you're going to take your little Chinese grafting tool, and one little trick that I've found is you want to take that tip, that little flexible tip on there, and just kind of take it with your fingernail and your finger and give it a little extra curvature so that it has just a little bit of a bend to it to start with. Because when you go to put that into your cell, you don't want a point. If you have a point on this, it's going to pretty much puncture through your cell wall inside your frame on your foundation. It's going to push down through. So if it has a little curvature on it, it kind of will slide down right in through there. Again, you don't want to do grafting from brand new foundation, because brand new foundation that has been drawn out and the queen has laid into, it's going to be very, very fragile, so to speak. So you want to use some comb that's a little bit darker, a little bit older. Number one, that's going to make it a lot easier for you to see these larvae that are on the bottom of the cells.
What about like the black plastic frames? Are they pretty good, or?
You can see the larvae on them pretty good. I have some of those. Most of my stuff is just wax foundation. They say that the black plastic makes it easier to see. You can, it's again personal preference. So you're going to be, this is just a little blow up. You're going to be looking for very, very small larvae that you want to your grafting with. Again, different types of cell bars that you can use. Again, personal preference. This particular type here uses push-in cups, where you have a cell bar that you drill a specific size hole, and then these little cups push up into it, and you graft your larva into those particular cups. The ones I like are the plastic cell cups, like the ones you have in your little kit, that as the bees are working that larva, the nurse bees are feeding those larvae, you can see the amount of royal jelly that they are putting inside those larvae. These are basically 1 day from grafting. So you can see that they have really started putting a lot of royal jelly in there, and by the time the 3rd day goes by, this cell cup will be completely full of royal jelly all the way down to then. And that gives you a good indication of how you have fed your bees, how well they're going to feed those larvae. If the bees are not well fed, if they don't have access, the nurse bees don't have access to pollen and some syrup, they are not going to produce good royal jelly in their hypopharyngeal glands. This bottom row was with the wax cell cups. You can pass these around, you can look at them a little closer and see what they are. The wax cell cups, I did a test just to see, do the bees like them better, do they work them better, do they look any different? Basically, when you look at this, you say, well, gee, these are a whole lot longer than these. Well, you have to remember that wax cell cup is just a little teeny thing, and they're going to draw wax around that cup and on down, where on these you have that much length of the plastic cell cup. So when you look at the length of this and the length of this, they're really the same length.
So the ones on the top bar that don't have the royal jelly, those are the 3 that didn't take?
Yeah, those are the ones that didn't take, basically. Something was wrong, I smushed the larva, or for some reason they didn't like it. A lot of times when you're grafting, you have to make sure that you lay the larva in there and don't turn it upside down. If you turn it upside down, it already knows that it's breathing from its spiracles that are exposed on the bottom side, and if you flip it over, it basically chokes itself to death. So you have to be very careful. Again, practice makes perfect, no matter which method you're using. Just a little close up showing what I was talking about with the royal jelly. The queen cells in the Genter method, Nycot method. 2 different names, 2 different manufacturers. Same thing, you buy your kit, and like Dana said, for a 10-cell basic kit, you're looking at $75 or $80. Basically, you start out with your little cup that the queen has laid an egg in, and they've raised the larva in, and you take that when the larva has emerged from the egg and has changed into the larva. You're just going to put that little cup inside these holders, and these holders are just another method of grabbing a hold of the queen cell to put it into your mating node. So some people like, this is a little bit bigger to grab a hold of, and has just a little bit bigger flange on the top of it than the little cells, the little cell cups. This bottom one is just cells drawn on the little plastic push-in cups. All the methods we talked about will produce queens, but you need a hive in order to develop those queen cells. So this hive basically is going to be called a cell builder hive. So in addition to all of the paraphernalia that you need to produce those cells, now you need equipment to raise those cells in. We have different classifications. They call them cell starters, cell builders, cell finishers. They can be done in one hive, or they can be done in several hives. Again, depends on how much equipment you have that you want to devote to your queen rearing operation. Cell builders, you can have a queenless cell builder. You can have a queen right cell builder. Again, choose which method you like best. Early this morning, Dan was talking about your cell starter, where when you first graft your larva, you put it in a hive that has copious amounts of nurse bees. It is just over flooded with nurse bees. So, Dan talked about Dr. Connor's little box that he came up with that has a screen on it and everything, so you just cram oodles of nurse bees in there. Those nurse bees is what you need to produce that royal jelly, to feed those larvae copious amounts of royal jelly. That's what you need. Once those cells have been started, then you can take them and put them into another queenless hive and let those bees finish those cells. Again, you need lots of nurse bees in there. After the cells have been completely drawn out, then you can put them into what we call a finisher hive, which could be a queenless hive or a queen right hive with a queen down below a queen excluder and another box on top of it that you're going to put your cells that have been drawn out into. Basically just acts as an incubator. So all of this depends, again, on how much equipment you want to devote into that queen rearing. It can all be done in one box. It doesn't have to be spread out into a number of boxes. You can take a real nice hive that you have, and you say, well, it's going to make honey. Well, you want to make honey or you want to make queens? So you take that real nice hive and you take the frames in there that have cap brood on them. You leave a couple frames of cap brood in there. The frames that have eggs and larvae on them, you might only leave one of those in there. And you want frames that have pollen, frames that have some honey on them. And then you shake all of the other frames that had the eggs on them. You shake those all into there, and you jam about 2 boxes worth of bees into one box. You put your cells in there to start, and you just let the bees do their thing. You got to come back in 4 or 5 days, because instinctively they know that, hey, we got to make queens. We have a few eggs over here, so we're going to make queens out of our own larvae that are just emerging. So you have to go in there and carefully make sure that you've removed any stray queen cells that are being built on a frame that you don't want an extra queen in there. Because if that queen happens to emerge first, then she's going to destroy all the rest of your queen cells. And we'll show you that this afternoon outside in the demo out there. So again, creating your cell builder, that's a good start. You want to make sure that you have a feeder of some kind, so they have extra syrup. You say, well, there's a honey flow on. They still need a feeder in there to supplement their needs. You should also put a chunk of a pollen patty in there. It's amazing. You can say, they're bringing in all kind of pollen. But you put a pollen patty in a cell starter hive, and you come back tomorrow, and you're going to be amazed at how much of it is gone. Those nurse bees are consuming that pollen very rapidly. Again, more bees. You need, when you take the lid off of that, you ought to have bees hanging off of the cover. You know, there ought to be just jam-packed bees. You should hardly even be able to see any of the frame. Again, to rear number of queen cells, you're going to need a very large proportion of young bees to care for the larvae and build the cells. The hive that you're going to rear the cells must be fed with some syrup and some pollen patties. You could have extra frames of pollen that the bees have collected, put it in there. Even with that, I still like to put that extra little bit of pollen patty in there for them. Worker bees are going to build queen cells as part of their reproductive cycle. They're going to do that based on the amount of food available, the colony strength, the environmental conditions, and their genetic propensity to reproduce. Cell builder, large population of bees. You're going to have lots of bees inside, you're going to have lots of bees outside. This cell builder here, again, Dan talked about ventilation. You want to make sure that you have the cover propped up a little bit, that you possibly have a screen bottom board on there. They need room. They need to have ventilation for themselves. Otherwise, they can die very easily when you're cramming that many bees into it. Again, your cell bars are going to get put in the middle of your cell builder hive, your starter. Later on, again, we have our cell builder. You're going to start with a bottom board, an empty deep super, division board feeder. You're going to have 5 or 6 pounds of bees jammed into there. Again, like I said, you're going to put 2 boxes worth of bees into one box. The number of bees in there kind of determines how many queens you're going to be raised. Most of the time, a hive like that one that we showed in the picture a couple slides back, that type of operation as far as that hive goes, you could start anywhere around 60 cells in that hive at a time without any problem. Again, you want to check for emergency cells a couple days later. This operation, just shows a number of cell builders. You can add a super up above that, is going to just give a little extra room for the bees to cluster. It's going to give them something to do. In the meantime, extra bees that emerge, you can take them out, stop nukes with them. Conditions created to cause the bees to build extra queen cells. We want that crowded condition in the brood nest. We're going to simulate to them what they need in order to think that they have to raise queens. The overabundance of nurse bees for royal jelly, comb builders are stimulated by feeding them syrup. So, to the rescue. Thank you. So they need an overabundance of everything in order to build those cells to keep everything going. Good supply of pollen. That pollen is needed by those nurse bees to aid them in producing royal jelly in their hypopharyngeal glands. You need good ventilation. You need the lack of queen pheromones. If there's a queen in there, it's going to suppress the starting of those cells. So that's why most of the time you're going to use that starter is going to be completely queenless. Doesn't have to be queenless very long. It can be queenless for just a couple hours. And they know that there's no queen in there. That queen pheromone is no longer being distributed through that hive. So you pull that queen out of there, A couple hours later, you can use those bees in there to raise your new queen cells. Calendar dates. Everybody this morning has talked about calendar dates. 16 days from the day that egg is laid to the time that new queen emerges. We graft 4 days after the eggs were laid, 3 days in the egg, 24 hours as larva. Those new virgin queens will emerge somewhere in the vicinity of 12 days, plus or minus a few hours. Queen cells must be harvested before they emerge. We can't leave that whole bar of cells in there and say, well, you know, we'll wait till a couple of them emerge. No, the first one out is going to go around and pretty much kill off any of the other ones that are on the way to emerge. And what will happen is your cells will look like this. They'll have holes chewed in the side of them. That means you have a rogue queen in there. Normal queen cell that emerges, you're going to have your little flap hanging off the bottom. Sometimes it'll already be flipped off. Otherwise, it could still be hanging. And there are some times where that queen will emerge, that flap will be hanging there, and the bees will put it back in place. And you'll say, oh, I haven't had any queens emerge yet. Yeah, well, they can surprise you very, very well. Again, a chewed down queen cell that didn't make it. Now the next thing, you know, you've gone equipment from getting all the little paraphernalia that you need to graft your larva, get your larva in the queen cups, get your hives, extra equipment to raise those queen cells. Now, the queen cells are ready. It's like, oh wow, now what am I going to do? I have 10 queens ready to emerge. So you need mating nukes. You need one mating nuke for each new queen that you are going to hopefully raise. So again, you need some more equipment. Back to the store you go. You got to remember that you have to do this ahead of time. It's like not today, oh, these queens are ready to emerge. Oh, what am I going to do? You have to kind of plan all of that ahead. So you have had to been to your bee supply dealer already and bought whatever types of mating nukes you're going to use. Mating nuke is a queenless hive with any number of types of boxes. You'll see them when we do our demonstration outside later. They have some bees and no queen. They could have bees and a little bit of brood, bees and no brood. It just depends on how you're going to do your operation. Virgin queens. We have to remember that queens emerge from the cell. They do not hatch. It's a term that we kind of use hand in hand. We try to say emerge because they chew themselves out of the cell and emerge from it rather than bust it open and hatch. The queens have to mate in good weather. So it's another thing we need. We don't have any control over it, but 8 to 12 days after those new queens emerge, they have a need to mate. The queens and drones usually fly and mate in the late afternoon. When you go to your hive late in the day, it's just buzzing with drones returning to the hive around 5 o'clock or so. They're coming back in from their unsuccessful mating flights. Queen must usually mate within 20 days. If they don't, they'll become drone-laying queens. Their ovaries will develop, they haven't mated, and they may turn into a drone-laying queen, or they may just be there. Usually they'll begin laying eggs several days after they've been mated. Young queens sometimes will lay more than one egg per cell. Their body mechanism is just not quite squared away yet, so you may pull a frame out that has a brand new queen in it, and you may see some cells that have several eggs in them. That just kind of should go away within a few days. If you come back to that hive 3 weeks from now and there's still multiple eggs being laid by that queen, she needs to be eliminated. A brood pattern. We need a good brood pattern from those new queens. You can usually note that within 4 or 5 days. You can see, yes, she started in the center and she's concentrically laying more eggs. The larvae are showing up in the center and eggs on out. So at that, you know, you have a good queen. Again, they're going to have their own mating nuke. Different styles of mating nukes. You have this one, basically a 4 or 5 frame nuke. You have little baby nukes. We have some of these outside. You have nukes that are broken up into regular size frames, basically split in half. Again, 5 frame nuke. You have a feeder of some kind. You want to feed. Make sure you have food on there. A very small opening for the bees to go in and out of. Remember, we have just a small quantity of bees in these mating nukes. They are very susceptible to being robbed, especially in a time of the year when, if there's no nectar flow going on. That's why we like to tell everybody, raise queens. It's a time of the year when the bees are raising queens. There's usually a nectar flow, pollen flow, and everything is coming along right in that standpoint.
If you have such a small entrance, though, how's the ventilation with it, though? You know.
Well, question was, if you have such a small entrance, what about the ventilation? You have to remember that you only have a small amount of bees in there. It doesn't, inside that box, doesn't look like that hive that had 10,000 bees on the outside. You may only have 1,000 bees inside here. So you don't need an entire, you know, ventilation system for them in there. Again, the outside entrances, you know, you can paint your box. This is either a 3-way or a 4-way box with a very small entrance on each side. This is probably a 3-way because this looks like it's kind of in the middle. It'd be either 3 or 4 compartments. Again, you can, you know, you don't have to have a whole bunch of little ones. They have these particular boxes called queen castles, which have multiple frames, little compartments. They have them in 2 frames, where you have one deep box that has 8 frames in it, 4 separate sections with 2 frames each, with a little entrance on all 4 sides of the box. You have others that are 3 frames. The 3 frames just give a little bit better working room for you and the bees. Less chances to smush each other. Again, a couple other pictures of 4-frame little mini nuke here. A queen mating yard. Bunch of small mini nukes. Some of the larger nukes will hold, you know, you can use 5-frame nukes. Just depends on what your pocketbook and your method that you select to do this in. Once the queen has exhibited characteristics of laying a good pattern, everything looks okay, fine, you can say, okay, now that queen's ready for market, either for you to use in one of your hives or for you to put a price tag on her and sell. Most of the time, most of us try to mark our queens. It makes it easier for us to find in that mating nuke. Even though there's only 1,000 or 2,000 bees in there, or, you know, if it's a 5-frame nuke, you might have more bees in there. Once you've established that she's doing a good job with her pattern and everything, pull her out, mark her. Now she's marked. It makes it easier to find when Dan calls up and says, hey, you got any queens? Oh yeah, I got one. Man, there's only 5 frames in here. Why can't I find this queen? You know, so when you marked her, it's easier for you to find. When you send her out to somebody else, she's already marked. It makes it nicer. Again, we have the standard color code. You can use a queen catcher marking tube to mark the queen in. use that, another little added contraption that you can buy. It's, again, pass that around in case anybody hasn't seen one. You basically get a hold of your queen and put her inside of here. It has a little plunger with a little piece of foam on it. You can push that up gently, so you don't squish her completely. You want to, sometimes she's very stubborn. She doesn't want to turn upside down, so you can mark her thorax. There's some little square holes in this screen. You get her thorax up against her, gently give her a little bit of pressure, and get her thorax between one of these little openings, and take your fancy little paint marker and mark her. Blow on it for a couple seconds to help dry it, and then pull the tube down a little bit so that she has free movement in there, because you don't want to put her right back into the hive with that fresh paint on her. It gives a little bit of an odor, and it gives you the chance of possibly something going wrong. Again, this year's color, white. Some people want to clip their queen. You can take a very small pair of scissors and clip a little bit off of the primary wing. That keeps her from flying very far, but it doesn't keep the hive from swarming, because she could fly out, land on the ground. Some of the bees will go out, they'll swarm, they'll come back to the hive. She's laying on the ground with 5 or 6 dozen bees, and the hive has already made queen cells, so a couple of those other queen cells that are in there are going to emerge out, and the hive's still going to swarm. So clipping doesn't keep from swarming, it just helps identify the queen if by some chance your marking has gone away. Again, for sale, you're going to cage your queen, various assorted queen cages. You have the 3-hole Benton cage or Conan cage. There's 2 different styles of this. You have your California mini cages. You have your JZBZ cages. Everybody has their own preference. My preference is the 3-hole wooden cage. When you're going to ship them, you can ship, multiple queens in what they call battery boxes. You can ship them that way. You've raised a bunch of beautiful queen cells, and you have 11 too many. This batch of queens that went in my mating nukes yesterday, it's like, wow, I don't have enough time to put all these in. So you can take regular queen cages and drill a little bit bigger hole in the top of them, and your queen cell will fit nicely down through that hole. You have to put a little bit of food in with it so that they have something for the queen when she emerges. She needs to eat right away, so you put a little wad of candy in the bottom so that she has something to eat when she emerges, before she gets a little bit of pheromones and the bees in the hive start taking care of her. You have too many queens, too many queen cells, not enough places to put them, not enough time to put them. Big thunderstorm came up, so you just throw them in some cages. You can put them in the little California mini cages, same way. You always want to put a little bit of sugar candy in the bottom. That helps them. Again, some more equipment that you need, but if you're going to be selling queens, you need to have some queen cages on hand anyway, so you're going to need to buy some of those. The pocketbook keeps going down, down, down. But, it's what we like to do. Do we make money at it? Yes, no, maybe. Few comments. We have a definite need for Ohio-raised queens. People that get packages and queens from the South say, "Oh man, they just didn't do good. They didn't make it." There's an additional bonus of earning some money somewhere down the road. OSBA encourages sharing stock, which OSBA, our Ohio beekeepers are sharing stuff with Dan O'Hanlon and Gabe down in West Virginia, with the West Virginia queen producers, which I am also a part of.
I'm not giving Gabe any of those queens.
You're not giving him any? Okay. Oh, well. Again, we have to remember one key point, that Ohio law requires a queen certificate of inspection. Your hives, if you're going to be selling queens or nukes or anything like that out of your bee yard, requires a separate inspection other than the normal bee inspector coming by in August. Everything needs to be inspected prior to now. If you're going to be selling queens next week, you need a special queen certificate of inspection saying that everything is okay, for you to sell queens.
How long does it take to get that inspection? If you're supposed to put the application in for April, how long does it take for them to actually get out? Because I think she works part-time between the OSU plant lab and the Department of Agriculture apiary inspection.
Yes.
Like every other day.
Yes, Barb does work part-time, but when you send that paperwork in that says you need inspected for queen sales, that pretty much immediately goes out to the bee inspector to say, this operation needs inspected for queen sales.
Of your county, right?
Yeah, your county inspector, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Barb doesn't go out and do that herself. That's again done by the county inspector, but they do a little more thorough inspection. Usually a sample is sent into to Beltsville for assignment tests and anything else that that comes along the line.
What happens if your county doesn't have one?
If your county doesn't have an inspector, then Barb has somebody come and inspect your hive somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or she's
Either
supposed
she will
to.
come or she will conjure somebody from a neighboring county to come and do that inspection.